What we'll do is I'm going to tell you about each of the folks we'll be reading today, and then they're going to come up and read in that order so that we don't break the flow between the poets by me interrupting. I do have one small piece of bad news, which is that Margaret Ray was not able to join us today, and she hates that she isn't, and we hate that she isn't able to. So Margaret's here with us in spirit, and we do encourage you to still check out her book that we have available and support her in that way if you feel so inclined, and we thank you for that. So our first reader today is going to be Caleb Bouchard. Caleb is the author of The Satirist, Prose Poems, and 79 Nonets. A Georgia native, he earned his MFA in creative writing from Georgia College and State University and currently teaches English at Chattahoochee Technical College right outside Atlanta. And following Caleb today, our second poet, will be William Woolfitt. William grew up in Farmington, West Virginia. He's the author of 4 poetry collections, and the most recent is The Night the Rain Had Nowhere to Go. He's also published 2 story collections and an essay collection. Ring of Earth Stories came out in 2023. Eyes Moving Through the Dark, Essays, is forthcoming from Orison Books, which is actually local to Asheville. We know them well. He attended Fairmont State University, Hollins University, and Penn State, and lives in Southeast Tennessee. And we'll also be publishing in our chat links to the poets' websites. You can also find those on the event page where you find the information about this event. And then finally, we'll have reading Tony Robles. Tony is the author of Thrift Store Metamorphosis. He's been a Carl Sandburg writer in residence and was nominated for Poet Laureate of San Francisco in 2017. A 3-time Pushcart nominee, his work is published in various journals, including the Bellingham Review, Roadrunner Review, and more. He's a graduate of Vermont College of Fine Arts and teaches creative writing at Lenoir Rhyne University, which is also right here in Western North Carolina. And you can find more on his website as well. So please, let's start by welcoming Caleb Bouchard.
Thank you, Stephanie, and thank you, Malaprops, for having me, and thank you all for being here. And I'm looking forward to hearing the readings from William and Tony in a few minutes here. I'm going to read a few pieces from this book I put out last year called The Satirist. It's a collection of prose poems, and I assume that everyone has a basic understanding of what prose poetry is, so I won't say too much about that. I will say that something to keep in mind is that there is a recurring character of an Elvis impersonator. And after the book came out and a few people had read it, they asked, is it one Elvis impersonator or is it several different impersonators? And my answer to that is yes. So here's the title piece called The Satirist. After the police officer pulled me over, the first thing he said was, "Are you the satirist?" I said, "I certainly am not. I don't think I've ever even met a satirist." The officer unfolded a photograph from his pocket, studied it, then pinned a glare on me. He showed me the picture. "You're telling me you don't know who this is?" He showed me the photograph. It was my cousin Marcus. We looked almost identical, though I was a bit heavier at the time, and Marcus had hints of a scraggly beard, whereas I've always been clean-shaven. We hadn't seen or spoken to each other in years, ever since he went off to art school and I took a job at the local bank. I almost explained all of this to the officer, but caught myself before spilling the beans. Instead, I said, "That guy looks malnourished. Look at me. We're not the same. What do you want with a lowly satirist anyway?" The officer said he wrote an off-colored play about the mayor. "Really?" I said. "Was it a comedy or a tragedy?" "I can't disclose that," the officer said. "What is the satirist, charged with?" I said. The officer seemed distracted. He was fanning his flashlight in the backseat of my car, where my pickleball gear lay buried in the floorboards. Above us, a chopper with a searchlight sliced its way through the night sky. My palms started to dampen, so I asked if I could continue on my way. The officer said, "One more thing." He pulled out a colorful greeting card, which had a drawing of a bright-eyed porcupine holding a red balloon. "It's my daughter's birthday tomorrow. You'd be doing me a big favor if you could write something. Make it witty." Elvis at NYU. An Elvis impersonator was invited to give a one-day graduate seminar at NYU. During the talk, Elvis demonstrated such techniques as the powerhouse knee drop, the one-arm windmill, and the iconic sneer, which, Elvis emphasized, was the essence of the king. "If you can't master the sneer, you can forget about the rest, mama. It's the curtain that rises before the play." Elvis also showed the packed auditorium the proper method of wiping off sweat and flicking it into the audience with grace and poise, a maneuver that made women go wild, but which few impersonators could authentically replicate. During the Q&A session, a student in the third row asked Elvis if he could give a tutorial on the hound dog hip shake, but Elvis shook his head. He explained that the hip shake was a move Elvis neither invented nor perfected. It was more of a marketing ploy to sell movie tickets rather than a genuine artistic expression. At the end of the workshop, one of the deans of the university, Elvis forgot which college or school she served, presented him with an honorary doctorate in performance studies, to which Elvis responded, "Oh, this ain't a performance, mama. This is life." The sun and the mooning. The sun pulls down its shorts and moons the galaxy, eclipsing itself with its dark red behind. Earth is outraged and drafts a petition. Neptune and Saturn sign immediately, just happy to be included. Uranus refuses and defiantly joins the sun in mooning the other planets, a snotty little sibling emulating an older, brattier child. Mars, like Earth, is hot with indignation and organizes a protest rally. All told, Earth and Mars are the only picketers to show up. Jupiter is away on a work retreat, while Venus and Mercury are too nervous to show their support. The sun knows where they live. Sex and the opera. A woman wants sex. Her husband says, "But we have tickets to the opera." The woman says, "I don't care. It's been so long, I'm about to burst." The husband says, "We have plenty of sex. It's in all the cupboards, in the refrigerator, in every drawer and closet of every room. But tonight, we're going to the opera. These tickets cost me a third of my paycheck." The woman says, "Can't we order in some opera tonight? All I can think about is sex, and I don't feel like leaving the house." The husband waves the tickets and says, "But these seats are right behind the orchestra pit." "Ugh," says the woman. "I hate that section. Remember how the tuba blocked my view last time?" The husband sighs and complies before the spat turns into a bigger argument. He picks up the phone. The woman goes over to the pantry and opens up a container of sex. It smells sour and musty. She checks the expiration date. Surprisingly, it's still good. Using a plastic baby spoon, the woman takes a small bite of sex. The taste is the same as ever. The taste is the same as ever. I did get that right. Simultaneously comforting and disappointing, with a slight aftertaste of guilt. The husband hangs up and says, "They will deliver the opera singers in half an hour. I also ordered a side of garlic knots." He looks at his wife with her stacked containers of sex. Taking off his shoes and socks, he says, "Well, hell, I might as well have some too." Elvis pays his respects. An Elvis impersonator drove down to Pembroke Pines, Florida, to preside over a funeral. The weather was so sticky, so warm and gooey, it reminded him of a peanut butter and banana sandwich. The branches of palm trees slumped towards the scorching hot ground, their leaves bloated from sunlight. The heaviness in the air made Elvis antsy. At the church, the dead man's wife cried on the cried. Yes, I got that. At the church, the dead man's wife cried on Elvis's black suede jumpsuit, which was decorated with golden studs on the torso and outer leg seams. The dead man's daughter, a plump woman in her 40s, handed Elvis some prepared remarks, which he read at the beginning of the service. Less than a dozen people filled the creaky wooden rows, their crepey skin the color of pork rinds. He read from the prepared remarks, which extolled the wholesome virtues and values of the dead man, how he loved his family more than all the riches in the world. Elvis then opened it up for eulogies from the audience. A bald man with a green fanny pack blurted, "Mort owed me $500. He then turned to the dead man's wife. "I expect restitution, Cynthia." After the service, the frail, wrinkled pallbearers, friends the dead man had made through bingo night at Hooters, carried the casket out to the graveyard. As the dead man's body was lowered into the ground, Elvis sang an a cappella version of "I'll Remember You" from the 1966 American musical comedy Spin Out. Everyone stared at the gaping hole in the earth as he sang. They were still lowering the casket into the ground when Elvis finished the song. The dead man's daughter gestured to him, ordering him to sing another, but he had only been paid to do one song. Instead, he contorted his body into the shape of a white crane and executed a smooth, sweeping kick, like a seagull flying over a sandy shoreline at daybreak. Kung Fu was always free of charge. Artaud's Ghost. There was a frantic knock on my door. I answered and was met with the ghost of Antonin Artaud. The ghost was of Artaud as a child. He had thin lips and piercing charcoal-colored eyes. He held a grenade in both hands as if it were a dead bird. "Come out and play, please," Artaud said in French. "I'm afraid I'm busy," I said, also in French. "I'm up to my eyeballs in ungraded essays." Artaud said, "But I've just come up with a new game. It's called All Writing is Pig Shit." I said, "Oh, is it anything like Twister?" "No," Artaud said. "However, it's very similar to other games I've invented. In fact, it's essentially identical to my most famous parlor game, Revolt Against Poetry. I simply transposed the rules word for word and gave it a new title." I had zoned out for a moment. My thoughts had stumbled back to this time when I myself was a child, and my father had given me a snow globe as a souvenir from a business trip. I remembered the tiny, bundled up pedestrians frozen on the sidewalk of the ceramic sculpture inside the glass, and the giant knife-like skyscrapers, stoic and unwavering against the torrent of glimmering snow. Vivid as this was in my memory, I couldn't remember what city the snow globe depicted. It bugged me. Was it Baltimore, Boston, Philadelphia, Paris? After a beat, I snapped out of it and said, "Hey, can I see that grenade?" "Certainly," Artaud said. "Pull the pin and the game will begin." One last poem. Rebirth. A fallen rose petal lies on the hardwood steps of an apartment stairway. A mail carrier comes in carrying several parcels. She steps on the rose petal and it turns into a purple pillbox hat. Not noticing, the carrier continues to climb up the stairway. A few minutes later, the landlord enters the foyer and says, "My mother's pillbox hat. Why, that thing has been missing for 40 years. He tries to pick it up, but it does not budge, despite how much he pulls and claws. The landlord concludes, "It must be nailed to the floor in some enigmatic memorial to my late beloved mother." But who among my tenants knew my mother, let alone feel motivated to pay tribute to her? It's very possible this is all a jape to mock her memory. It's not right for this hat to be here in this forlorn stairway. Anyway, getting stomped on all day. Pah! I will put in a maintenance order to have that hat pried up from the floor. Then I will place it on my mantle, right beside her urn. Satisfied with his plan, the landlord bounds up the stairs to post an eviction notice. A trio of boisterous children pass him on the way down. Their chaotic footfalls bounce off the purple pillbox hat, causing it to transform first into a yo-yo, then into a paddleboard, and then finally into the trembling, beating heart of Saint Augustine. Thank you.
I'm William Woolfitt, and I'm going to read from my book, The Night the Rain Had Nowhere to Go, from Bell Point Press. I think I'll read 3 poems about my grandparents in West Virginia, and then I'll try to get out of the past, although that doesn't seem to be easy for me to do. And I'll try to jump forward in time to Tennessee, where I have lived for over 10 years now. You would think I could finally write a Tennessee poem. So 3 poems with Tennessee and my children eventually, but we'll start with some West Virginia poems, since West Virginia keeps on following me wherever I go. This poem is called Turquoise Circles. I drive 400 miles to my grandparents' Angus cattle farm near Nestorville, West Virginia, and walk up the knob, zenith and center of meadows they mowed, cow paths, rust-roofed sheds, silo, shrinking pond. Once I knew how to find mayapple, trillium, and jewelweed. A crow says, caw, caw, caw. Maybe my lost ones are reaching for me. I stand on the knob. I think this is what it's like to be alive, to wonder and dread. I try to bring them back. For me, for my sons. I think of the burning planet where we will live. Once on the knob, Pa pointed his hand and named the near counties, the rounded lines of gray-green hills. Maybe he said Limestone, Laurel Mountain, Polecat, Pifer, the long folded edge of the Alleghenies, those hills pocked with mine pits, ringing with the whistles of helper trains that no longer run. Once he sang, I won't need this house no longer. That was before Applied Energy built wind farms on Laurel Mountain, turbines, blinkers, flashing red warnings nightly. That was before cow burps were linked to greenhouse gas, glacial melt. That was before the coyotes came, eating anything they can chew, the DNR says. Once, Paul baled hay, strung barbed wire, dug out the crowns of multiflora, and burned the thorny top vines, clipped bull calves. What else did he say? I reach for him, grab a handful of empty air. One night, my older boy and I visit Grandma, who lives alone on the farm. I try to hold the memory of her ember isle warm in my hands. She sits near a TV tray, plastic cup. She and the boy kick a cloth ball, play keep away. The boy draws 2 big turquoise circles. These are dream ponds, the boy says. They help you go to sleep. That night, we dream in the pool of a moon-washed house. There's Angus cow in me, flat-spired snail, night shark, jaguarundi, giant kelp, ground dove. Our home is oil-spilled sea, the damaged air. And this poem is actually about my great-grandparents, and I knew them too. And I know a lot of details, but I don't know how the details fit together. So it's just sort of a list of nouns. So if this poem doesn't have verbs in it, it's because I have a hard time imagining the verbs. So sort of a listy, nouny poem. This is called Figures Chipped and Molded from Coral. Handfuls of mulberries get out of Gilmer County, cross the West Fork, his Bible in burlap sacks, her washboards, the moon-eyed cow, they drag along the pitch of night, crab apples pelting their 2-room, wind shook, Frog ponds, Arbutus Park, streetcar, amen. Her taking in, wash, punching stick, CCC camps, his skin a fry pan from the tin mill, hot to touch. Quiet dell, sad bell peaches, a tramp with a spotted dog sells her. The colors of sundown, gravy, pickled beans, hills of sheets, borax and washing powder, glory, speak in tongues, cans she talks to, 20 mule team and the gold dust twins, dewberries from a worn out hillside, him sore, dreaming her an orchard. Save the seeds, he says, roam beauties, seek no furthers. Under the hard bed, his jar of stones, in her lard cans, river plums he mashes, splitting the tough red peels, her scolding. Yeast he adds, water boiled, set aside, turned to wine his hopes, clouds in a jar, the magic of sugar and air. And one more grandparents' poem, and one more West Virginia poem, and then I will try to leap into Tennessee and come into the past. Enough with nostalgia after one more. Two sketches pulled from the gray air. One spring when his children were small, my grandfather did what he had to do. He took his gun to the edge of the field at the woods line, where red-bellied woodpeckers hammered trees, where animal eyes gleamed on the darkest nights. In the lean years, the early years, he took his gun and sighted and squeezed. He shot a fox squirrel with a mouthful of leaves. He shot a fox squirrel carrying bits of grapevine. They were collecting materials for the loose masses they nested in. He lifted and bagged limp bodies in rusty coats. He waited. If he saw no more fox squirrels, he crossed the ravine, went into the deep woods, went looking for the smaller gray squirrels he sometimes saw there, sometimes did not. From his bloody hands, my grandmother took the headless squirrel bodies, singed them to burn any stray hairs. Bodies like puppets, like dolls. She washed them in several waters, patted them with an old dish towel. She quartered or cut them into neat pieces. She rubbed over them pepper and salt, rolled them in flour or fine cornmeal, dipped them in egg if she had an unsold egg. She made squirrel and dumpling, or fried squirrel and made gravy. She stewed them in salted water until their meat was tender, their bones pink. So I finally got around, thank you. I finally got around to writing a Tennessee poem, or so I thought. And I was so proud of myself when I started writing Tennessee poems that I put Tennessee in the title just so everybody would see that I was finally making a Tennessee poem. And this must be in my transitional phase because West Virginia invades the middle of this poem, but it tries to be a Tennessee poem. I'm getting there. Maybe 10 years from now, I'll stop having West Virginia issues. This is a prose poem, and it is called Buying Snowball Pumpkins in Athens, Tennessee. And there's a corn maze fall festival in Athens, Tennessee that my sons have quite a lot of ridiculous fun at. So this is a leap into the recent past. My sons wrong turn in the corn maze, then shriek at light up skeletons, plastic bones, neon green spider webs. I'm ignoring the gnat-like hum of worry nerves in my chest. There's Tire Mountain, there's Sliding Hill, the boys zoom down. I'm not testing the weather. I'm not wondering about the sun, the heat. Is it mild today? Yolk yellow, not too bright, not too warm. I'm trying to look carefully. See only tractor ride, zip line, my sons at the hay jump, the pig race. Sarah and Mabel Carter sing When the World's on Fire. tide me over in the rock of ages. Not long ago, in the mountain state, 100-year flood, the Elk River guzzled all the rain, swallowed bridges and roads, spread trash and mud everywhere, ruined the houses of families who then had to live in campers and tents on Walgrove Road at Blue Creek. Not long ago, the coal washing foam that Freedom Industries spilled into the Elk, whiff of licorice in the tap water, nausea and rashes, diamond darters the spill may have wiped out. Not long ago, derecho, hard winds, no electricity on the hottest day of summer. Senator from my hometown siding with fossil fuels again. I'm buying sprinkle donuts for my sons to eat on the way home. I'm not feeling buzz in my chest, lump in my stomach. Maggie Anderson says, it's hard for a river to carve a valley, pulling toward the sea on its hands and knees. My sons ask me to name what they see out the windows. Paper mill, vinyl goblins, skulls that glow. There's Mouse Creek, crystalline stone, patch of clear sky, what may be earthly, little, still free. And this is another poem that wants everyone to know it's in Tennessee, so it's got Tennessee in the title. Making a home near Cleveland, Tennessee. We moved to a house with 5 acres and a ramshackle barn in a rural part of southeast Tennessee. My wife collects eggs from her blue Americana hens. My younger son crumples a leaf in the backyard's uneven shade. The older boy piles the brittle sticks that scattered down in the last stripping wind. My boys and I have gathered at the big oak, lichened, no longer splendid. Maybe the Cherokee found their way by this marker, I tell my boys, as we reach our arms around the trunk. Wherever we drive, we cross the trail of tears, see memorials for it each day. The earth hills up, shudders as voices ring in a ravine, a cave, as deer crash through the huckleberry snarls, as molding crews hammer iron in the stoveworks near the school where I teach. I read about the Rattlesnake Springs internment camps where Cherokee families were held without adequate shelter or food. I read about Harley Grant repairing the looted Cherokee graves at Moccasin Bend. He said it looked like someone had taken grenades and blown holes into the ground. Eva and Amble Wolf, a Cherokee basket maker, and her husband, remember they had to drive their pickup truck 80 miles to Hayesville, glean the scarce river cane for basket splints. She would dye with butternut hulls and bloodroot, then single or double weave. With our sons, my wife and I walked the gravel loop trail at Red Clay, where the Cherokee held councils in 1832. Georgia had denied them the right to elect leaders, to gather in peace, to testify in courts against white people. Along the roads in western North Carolina, Jeff Marley puts up small red-lettered signs that say, in Cherokee syllabary and in English, we are still here. We live in the heart of the Cherokee Nation, its history full of human spirit and sacrifice. I read in the visitor guide while my wife and I wait for snow soft serve cones at the Dairy Cream. Tamara tells me her grandmother sang hymns when white soldiers with bayonets marched her away. Sweet sounds that saved wretches, bright shining, holy songs in her birth tongue. I see a father feeding his child when soldiers rattle his door, and holding the child to his chest. One can uncover stories like this in my county. My sons and I try wrapping the oak again. It's too thick. Tatters of Hinswire jut where the bark swells like a fat lip, scabs over its scars. And one more poem. This poem is another Tennessee poem, but I must be in this phase of my writing where I don't have to put Tennessee in the title. So this is Benediction. although I do put it in the very first sentence of the poem, so I'm still trying to make everyone think I live in Tennessee, including myself. Benediction. Tennessee through all the 2 hot months is a lavishment of tiny daisy-like weeds. Might be robin's plantain, hairy fleabane, flourishing wherever there's ditch, seep, margin, scarp, its center a yellow smudge, its scruffy petals mostly a dingy white. But my 3-year-old christens them pink flowers, and so they are. Pink flowers everywhere we go, no matter how many he's picked, loaded into a sand bucket. Here are more pink flowers, new every morning, like mercy, never ceasing, between dirty creek and greenway. Pink flowers that he names, gathers, delights in, shows to the walkers we pass. 2 great-haired women in tracksuits, man with Pekingese riding in the wagon he tows. I picked these, beautiful, the boy says. The people he stops admire his findings. We chit-chat, we forget we're strangers. When they turn to go, he calls after them his blessing. Have a good pink flower day, he says, and it is so.
Mm.
Wonderful, wonderful poetry. It's really an honor to be here at Malaprop's. Caleb, it's kind of ironic you would bring up Elvis and Elvis imitators in your reading. I was jotting notes because I'm kind of an Elvis fan. So my Elvis top 5: Little Sister, Crying in the Chapel, Pocket Full of Rainbows. Now that's from the movie GI Blues, when he just got out of the army, 1960. King Creole, of course, the title track from the movie King Creole, co-starring Walter Matthau and Carolyn Jones. And Vic Morrow was actually the bad guy in that movie, shot in New Orleans. And then number 5, You're the Devil in Disguise. Let me ask you a question. Who was the guy that got him his water and his scarves after each performance in the 70s?
Is that
You're close. Charlie Hodge. That was his friend. The guy, he's a guy who gets me my water and my scarves. Charlie Hodge. So thank you for that. Thank you for indulging. Again, my name is Tony Robles. I live in Hendersonville, which is a short drive from here. My book is called Thrift Store Metamorphosis. And I guess the reason I wrote it was because I was working at the Goodwill in Hendersonville off of the Asheville Highway. And people would come in and buy things, but what I kind of tapped into were, wasn't so much what they bought, but what they as people brought into the thrift store. So I'm going to read a couple of poems from that. This is one that my mother likes, and she happens to be in the audience right now. It's called Assumptions. Mm-hmm. The man walked into the thrift store the other day. His countenance I immediately discounted. To my perception, he was likely one of those ignorant folks, the kind that would have a Confederate flag license plate. It was something in his demeanor that soured me. He came to the register where I work as a cashier, and he put down a pair of socks and a package of underwear. He reached into his wallet, hands trembling. And I remembered working at an insurance company years ago. A policy owner had sent in a handwritten letter. The writing, a frenzy of shakes and quivers, words struggling to fit within the confines of a lined sheet of paper. Where did this guy learn how to write? I laughed. I later found out that the man had Parkinson's, disease. And I felt bad for making fun of him. And the man in front of me takes money from his wallet with a quivering hand. And I place his underwear and socks in a bag and hand him change. Thank you kindly, he says, leaving me somewhat shaken. And I'll tell you, it was kind of funny. I was on the road driving. I think it was yesterday, and I saw a pickup truck, and on the back of the pickup truck was a bumper sticker, and it said God, guns, and Trump. And I thought, they left out the coleslaw. I mean, they need to reprint that bumper sticker. I mean, how can you, it shouldn't be allowed to get away with it. But anyway, sometimes you see people bringing in donations to the Goodwill, and sometimes the donations really made you think, and it kind of brought you to a different place. And this is called Ode to a Typewriter in a Trash Compactor. Sometimes one feels like a pallbearer at a thrift store. In the donation area, people drop off items that are no longer useful. Cups with cracks that distill memories of demarcation lines that divided kitchen tables. Microwave ovens that have waved one last time. Old sewing machines, crock pots, board games with missing pieces, warped records, rugs with stains that look like countries that were once on the map. These and 1,000 more items are carried to the trash compactor out and back. So hungry is the compactor that it can't get enough of everything. And I have seen the blasphemy of books sitting in the compactor, not tossed in by me, awaiting the final compressed language. I try to make poetic sense of it. And I see a typewriter has been tossed into the compactor. My fingers are cold as it has been snowing, and the typewriter's keys are surely as cold. My finger does not want to push the compactor button to squeeze the life out of the typewriter, for surely it allowed someone the chance to squeeze some life out of this thing we call life, in a story, a letter, a book. It's kind of funny that the shirt that I'm wearing tonight, I got it at the Goodwill. It's like full circle. I even ironed it before I came here. The ladies come in with bags swollen in the shapes of shirts, sweaters, pants that didn't quite fit or didn't fit at all. Those sweaters that called out to them, weaving a song saying, "Buy me, take me home, you'll look like you did back in high school." Fabrics that stretched the truth. But the truth is that history repeats. Things come back like that story from an uncle that's told over and over, where the names are changed to protect the guilty. And that uncle's old dress shoes, slacks, tie, half-filled bottle of Avon cologne sits on the thrift store shelf waiting for a chance to tell that story again, to live again. Like a record covered in dust and scratches that keep turning, returning, and returning. Those items that sit in a thrift store come back for another shot at life. Styles of yesteryear's trinkets, items that seemed sacred at one time, whose sacredness has faded or has fallen to the reality of practicality. And you have returned your purchase. And this poem is your receipt of having received and perhaps given. You know, when I was writing some of these poems, I was working, I was working the register, and sometimes there were some second and third hand Elvis records that did come in. You know, mostly from the 70s. And there was this cat that came in. You know, there's a Micronesian community in Hendersonville, right? Which is interesting because, you know, Micronesians, you know, they're island people, right? And they've migrated to the mountains. So I've always wondered, like, you know, what that transition is like, you know, having island people now living in the mountains. You know, do they feel contained, or do they feel like it's protected? You know? But anyway, there was this guy named Winter, and he's a Micronesian guy. Kind of, you know, me and him got kind of tight the last couple of years. So I met him. He was buying a shirt from Goodwill, and this is called a Micronesian Winter in Western North Carolina. Winter has come, yet the sun is being itself, playing its warmth on the skin. My banana tree is sprouting leaves in the front yard after being dormant for months, and I ready myself for work at the local thrift store, one of many thrift stores. And winter has come in the form of a 6'1" Micronesian man whose skin the sun has met since the day he was born. He comes in looking for shorts and shirts for the family. He smiles, and one of his eyes is clear, and the other one is covered with a filmy coat. And he comes to the counter with several pairs of shorts, shirts, and a smile. Are you Micronesian? I ask. I look at his shirt with the word Pohnpei printed on it. Yeah, he says. Is it? I'm Filipino, I say. And then we talk a bit. We talk about Filipino food and how Micronesians look like Filipinos and how Filipinos look like Micronesians. And our laughter is the laughter of cousins. How do you say hello in Pohnpeian? I ask. Kasalelia, he says. Kasalelia. What's your name, brother? I ask. Winter, he says. And we shake hands, and I look at one of his eyes, one glazed over, and he leaves with his family, leaving me with the warmest winter I've ever felt in my life. Am I almost out of time? Because, like, you know, we can do Elvis. I mean, somebody could give me my water and my scarf. Well, I don't have a scarf.
I'll get you a star.
It's Elvis will, I guess, you.
Yeah, I mean, we don't want like 4 long words, but we still have a little time, yeah.
All right. Well, since we've been talking about music and Elvis, you know, I didn't know before I moved here that Nina Simone, the birthplace of Nina Simone was so close to where I live in Hendersonville. And anyway, there was a woman who came in to the Goodwill one day, and she looked like Nina Simone. And anyway, the poem is called "The Woman Who Looked Like the Woman Who Looked Like Nina Simone." You caught my eye, even with your mask, a pandemic badge of the mouth. Yet your eyes spoke as you moved about the store. Black woman under the glare of fluorescent light, waiting in your own music, your own rhythm, while the canned music played over the thrift store speakers. And Nina's voice comes through suddenly, singing, birds flying high, you know how I feel. Breeze drifting on by, you know how I feel. It's a new day. And the thrift store is not far from a place called Tryon, birthplace of Nina Simone. And the store is where people try on this and try on that. But Nina never fit in Tryon, or maybe Tryon never fit her. The woman walks past the fitting room into another light, befitting a queen, moving as such, wading deep in night stars, past the cutting glare of fluorescent light. And thank you so much. And for Caleb just wanted a message. Well, I dated your big sister and I took her to a show. I went for some candy, along came Jim Dandy and they snuck right out the door. Little sister, don't you? Little sister, thank you.
Sorry we couldn't get all of the poets to sing, but the readings were beautiful, and we're just delighted that we were able to do this afternoon. Thank you so much again for joining us here in the store and at home, and another round of applause for the poets.